Hello and welcome to a new video from the G5 Family channel. I am Gail, of course, and I am standing at the port here in my local home city in Negros Occidental, Philippines. And man, oh man, I wish there was some way that I could share this breeze and the fresh air. We're about, as a bird flies from the ocean side, we're about probably 3/4 of a mile, give or take. Today I was sort of, call it introspective. I think it's inspired by a conversation with my wife a couple of days ago, but we were talking about some of the things that we miss in the U.S. You know, we've been here a little over 4 years now, and no complaints, by choice. Our visits home have been more or less obstructed or whatever you want to call it by circumstances, especially the pandemic. But, in any case, it's natural. I wouldn't call it being homesick, but it's natural to miss certain things, and we definitely do. Even Gina Lynn, she was only in the U.S. for 5 years, and even she talks about things that she misses. So I thought I would create a video on that topic. How about that? And so I'm calling this the things that I will never take for granted ever again after living in the Philippines for a few years. Now, I always throw this disclaimer down because it is true. I live here by choice. I am very content. I truly believe this is where we're supposed to be, and that's a topic for another day, another video. But the bottom line is, what I'm sharing with you is in no way, shape, or form complaints or any expression of frustration. It's just as pure and simple as, just things that we miss. And my camera is would rather look at the ocean than look at me. So I want to buzz through these fairly quickly because I can talk all day, as those of you who follow my channel know. So easily the top thing, easily the far most important thing that I will never take for granted after living in the Philippines is my family and my friends. That one-on-one, in-person, hugging necks, spending time, that cannot be replaced by technology. As wonderful as technology is, and believe me, we are so thankful because we do stay in very good touch with our families and our friends and so on and so forth. So that's a real blessing. But there's nothing like going home and hanging out with mom and dad, or going to a movie with friends, or going to a friend's house and playing games and letting the kids play together, all of those kinds of things. We definitely, and we do a lot of that here, of course, but we have lifelong friends and of course families, so that would be easily my number one thing that I will never take for granted after living in the Philippines for a few years. Now the rest of these are sort of toss-ups. There's no necessarily particular order, but I will say that easily very close to the top of the list is foods. This is an area that I really like right here. Let the camera swing around. So yeah, real pretty. These buildings that I'm walking past, I'm not really sure, what the original intent or the original purpose was to be. Bone, hello. But it's a really neat compound. It's called Barrio Fiesta, and these buildings are essentially open air buildings with thatch type roofs. Now I think that there is an actual roof, but underneath the thatch is more or less for appearance. But I'm noticing as I'm walking around a little bit, the park is a little bit unkept, unfortunately. It's a little bit overgrown and not as tidy as usual, but it's still a nice place to come. The and sit down. The Philippines offers a great cuisine, a lot of traditional and then a lot of modern influenced traditional foods. Walk over here a little bit. While those are great, I would say that the primaries are your chicken and pork type meals, tons of rice, which I opt out on for the most part. I do enjoy rice, but high carbs. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't get my physique by accident. I desperately miss, and it's the craziest things that you miss. It's like, taking it for granted, stopping through, driving through the Taco Bell or we have McDonald's here, so I'm sick of McDonald's, but and by the way, they call it McDo. McDo is what they call McDonald's. But even some of the nicer restaurants, you would think living in an island, tropics, we would have access to high-end seafoods, and we do, but it's just not as common as you would think. But anyway, we have access to seafoods, but just meat, potatoes. Without going too in depth, I could do a whole hour talk just on foods, but essentially foods, good old Southern cooking. I will definitely Tex-Mex. Never take that for granted. So number one is family and friendship, family and friends. Number two is foods. Number three, I would say climate. By the way, I'll share where I'm at. I'm in the area called the Plaza, and right here is the main auditorium, if that's coming into view. This is sort of a gathering spot. It's on the city square. Right over there, I'm fixing to walk into 7-Eleven and get me a Monster energy drink. I'm going to contradict myself as I share this. When I say climate, I actually really enjoy the climate here in the Philippines. It's hot year-round. It's hot and humid year-round. We do get a little bit of a break in January and February, are the coolest 2 months of the year, kind of like everywhere else, I guess. But our coolest is in the mid to upper 70s, and that's at night and in the mornings. It still gets up into the 80 degrees, but for some reason the air is a little bit drier. It's a little bit less humid during January and February, and we're already in the middle of March, and it still feels a little bit mild. Now, I do also know that I have acclimated a great deal to the climate here, but being able to wear shorts and flip-flops year-round, you cannot beat that. But what I do miss the cold. It has been literally since 2017 since I experienced any cold weather. The coolest temperature, apart from being in an air-conditioned house, the coolest temperature I have experienced is probably 75, 76 degrees Fahrenheit in the last 4 years. But again, so living in Southeast Texas, it's not as much as other parts of the country. We lived in Nashville also, and in Nashville you really did have the 4 seasons. You really did have a hard winter, you really did have a wonderful luscious green spring, and then you had a short, like a 10-week hot summer, and then it would start cooling off again in the fall, and the beautiful changing of the leaves, from the greens to reds and browns, and it's just, so I really enjoyed the seasonal changes living in Nashville, Tennessee. But yeah, so even though I do enjoy it here, I enjoy the climate here, I still miss the changing of the seasons and the crisp, cool air, different times of the year. But so family and friends definitely first, foods definitely next, climate. But one of the things I definitely will never take for granted again is utilities would definitely be on the list of things that I will never take for granted, and mostly speaking of electricity. Now, when we first came here, internet service was horrible, terrible. In fact, we made the mistake starting out with going with their citywide Wi-Fi. I mean, it's a subscription, you pay for it, but the service was just, I mean, it's not even, the word reliable or dependable doesn't even fit in the definition. It is just absolutely horrible. And then I found out by accident, I went over to check into cable TV, and lo and behold, found out that they offer internet over coax. Now, this goes back to 2000, probably early 2018. So, you know, almost 4 years ago, or 4 years ago. So, I immediately signed up for that, and bundled in was, you know, cable TV with 4 megabyte per second internet, but it was stable and it was constant, and, you know, with the occasional outage, but, you know, for the most part, it was really, really reliable. So, you know, internet suddenly became, you know, something that I could say that I had. And then it progressively over the years, it upgraded to 8 megabyte per second, then up to 25 megabyte per second, and now I'm on a 50 megabyte per second plan. And in the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, I would say, fiber has finally been activated in our city, and I'm going to move to fiber, which is 100 megabyte per second. So, yeah, so internet, but power, electricity, that is probably the most challenging. In fact, as I was throwing my stuff together to come out and record these conversations, the power went out just right then, and that's 2 days in a row. It's not every day, but it's almost every day. We'll have anywhere from a 5-minute to a 5-hour outage, and no explanation, no planning, no scheduling, and we never even know why. So, you know, it's just crazy. But again, you know, we live in a developing country. It should be expected, but it can be frustrating, and it's I will put it to you this way: the continually stable and reliable electric in the U.S., I will never take that for granted again after living in the Philippines for a few years. And then finally, probably, I'm kind of going back and forth. I think one more thing that I'll never take for granted would be, I know, traveling, ease of travel. So, to put that into context, the city we live in is about 120,000 population. So it's not a small city. It's not like a little bitty town, but it's also limited in terms of, we don't have any major malls. We don't have a movie theater. We don't have any of the high-end chain restaurants. The only chain restaurants you're going to see here is McDonald's and Jollibee. So for us to go and get groceries and things like that we can't source here locally, we drive over to another city across the island called Bacolod City, and there they do have massive major malls with you know, a variety of different types of grocery and supermarkets and superstores, so we can get all of the things we need. Now, the interesting thing, as a bird flies, from here to there is, I would say, about 35 miles. But as you drive there, it turns into 50 miles because of all of the driving through the mountains, all of the curves and the twists and turns. That trip, which in the U.S. you hop on the interstate, and of course traffic depending, you know, 50 miles, you're there in an hour. Here, it's a minimum of 2 to 2.5 hours. 2 hours is a really fast trip. And believe me, we've made that trip hundreds of times. So the reason for it is because you're going to get behind a bus, you're going to get behind, you know, a motorcycle or what we call a motor cab, which is a little tricycle, or bicycles or walkers for that matter. And the people live right on the highway, so you're always having to pay super close attention. The max speed that you're driving, for the most part, is about 20 to 30 miles an hour. So imagine getting on the interstate and driving 20 or 30 miles an hour. for 50 miles. And then throw in a bunch of twists and turns, because you're going through the mountains. So again, no complaints, but man, to get on Highway 59 out of Houston, or to get on to I-45, or to get on to in Nashville, get on to I-65 or I-40, and you hit the ramp and you're doing 80 miles an hour. That does not exist here. So, and then you have other, with the pandemic, we've had a lot of difficulties traveling between provinces, and especially crossing over water. Oh, and that's another thing. I mean, being island bound, if we want to cross over to the next island, we're also, factoring in, ferries, schedules, and things like that as well. So, making a trip here requires a little bit of planning, requires a little bit of thought put into it. You also, weather is a factor here, where, in the U.S., we just flip on the windshield wipers. Now, if there's icy conditions, that's another thing, but we don't have any ice here in the Philippines. But, even weather is a contributing factor when planning a trip. So anyway, those are my 5 things that I will never ever take for granted after living in the Philippines for the last 4 years. So family and friends, foods, climate, utilities, and then lastly, just the ease of travel. Those are my 5 things that I will never ever take for granted after living in the Philippines for the last 4 years. So I'm gonna wrap it up. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy. Leave some comments. Let me know your thoughts, your reactions to any of these things, etc., etc., etc. Have yourself a great day. And I don't care who you are, where you are, what you're doing. Make it the best day of your life. All right? Thanks a lot. See you in the next one.